we go.
All right. So you've got the rationale behind why you want to know chemistry is because there are ions, and one of those ions that's in blood, which is the calcium ion, it's +2 charge because it's in the it's a two-way metal in the periodic table. It loses 2 electrons when it's in water. We're 60% water. So calcium will be an electrolyte in water, and it's required for exocytosis, for bone, for coagulation of blood, for the mechanical vent muscle contraction, and for the electrical vent and the cardiac pacemaker potential. All right? This you won't see till next semester. This you'll see now. You follow? So, but we'll talk about calcium's role. You also need sodium. Remember we were talking about balances? We want to keep things homeostatic balance. We got to do it for calcium. We got to do it for sodium. We got to do it for water. Water has to be balanced. Water itself has to be balanced. If it's too high or too low. Everything has to be put in homeostatic balance, and that there's a special concentration of the amount of water or the concentration of water in blood. And you have hormones that are involved in controlling that homeostatic balance. Now that's next semester. Those hormones are proteins. Did everybody hear me? So that means DNA, RNA, protein, modified protein gets secreted by the cell into the bloodstream because that's endocrine. Everybody follow? So there's connections there. All right. So these proteins, very important, guys. It's the proteins that we're talking about. So the proteins can be in the cell. They can be membrane bound. Or they can be within the cell, outside the cell, or on the membrane. Everybody get me? It's that simple. And anything that you will learn from here on out in terms of proteins, you could classify. Hey, is that inside the cell, in the membrane of the cell, or outside the cell? Does everybody hear me? So as we go talking about these different cells and how they'll change, because remember, we're talking about cells make tissues, yeah? Cells make tissues for chapter 1. Cells make tissues. Then, obviously, guys, muscle cells aren't going to look like bone cells. Everyone agree? And bone cells aren't going to look like neural cells. Everyone agree? And neural cells are not going to look like gastrointestinal cells. Everyone agree?
Yes.
And gastrointestinal cells aren't going to look like liver cells. Everyone agree? And liver cells aren't going to look like anything else. They have their own structure, own form. But sure enough, they're still going to have protein that's either inside the cell, on the membrane of the cell, and or outside the cell. And sure enough, which hormones they have inside the cell and which hormones or which proteins they have inside the cell, on the membrane of the cell, or outside the cell is what's going to determine how they respond to the cells that are next to them and to distant cells that are sending signals. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because, hey, you can be sending signals to me all the time. Am I going to be able to hear you? Everyone agree? So if I'm deaf, if I, as we get older, we lose certain parts of our sensitivity in our ears. So certain frequencies we don't hear. And younger people, they have higher sensitivity, so they can hear higher frequencies. Right? You guys never heard of that?
Yes. That's why old men can't hear their wives.
So, it's selective hearing. We shut it off when we want to. Right? So anyway, so the idea is there, guys, is that a cell can only respond based on whether or not it's able to sense and respond. Does everyone agree? And that sensing and responding is based on these proteins again. These proteins. And these proteins are compounds. Does everyone agree? And those compounds are made up of molecules, and those molecules are made up of atoms. Okay?
So where the protein is placed depends on where the signal.
Yeah, and so this would make sense, guys. Let's think about this for a moment. Each of these proteins can be special or just general. Everyone agree? What would be the general protein?
I would say
The protein in the membrane.
So like a structural protein,
Yeah.
right? So cytoskeletal proteins. Everyone agree?
Yeah.
The proteins that are inside the cell that prevent the cell from collapsing on itself. Does that make sense?
okay.
Yeah, because each cell is going to have a shape. You're going to see this when we get into tissue. Okay? So cells are going to have a certain shape to them. And as they take on a certain shape and become tissues, they get organized, then the tissue is going to take on a certain shape. And so we classify tissues based on what they look like visually under the microscope. Chapter 4. Not there yet. Chapter 4. So chapter 3 is really right up to here. Everybody got me? Yeah. And it ends with this. And with this that's up here. Because these guys right here are examples of membrane-bound proteins that are specialized for the purpose of sending second messenger system signals into the cell. Okay. Professor P, you got me here now. If this is the membrane, I can be a protein that's just sitting here, boom. And I can be structural. You get me? So I could just be here for the purpose of creating structure. And then I got some structural protein on the inside of the cell that's connecting to me. And then I have protein on the outside of the cell that's connected to me. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because why? If I want to go from cells to tissues, I gotta not only do I have to make cells, but then I have to stick them together. Everyone agree? That's chapter 3. You understand? So this is the cells are gonna want to lead you to tissue. So they're gonna want to explain to you everything the cell can do to be able to make tissue. And that's all about making protein. You ever understand? It's that easy, guys. It is that easy. And then so I can have the protein, couldn't it be a door? Come on in, calcium. Yeah? So what do we call that? We call that a channel that facilitates the ion moving in or moving out. What determines whether something moves in or out of a cell?
It's electrons, no?
No, it's concentration. So watch. If I have a whole bunch of calcium out here and very little calcium in here, then when I open up that door,
it's gonna take it.
What direction is it going, guys? From out to in. Everyone agree? Because it's always higher concentration to lower concentration. Yes? If it's going the opposite way, then you're spending energy doing it. Everybody got me? That's what they call energy-dependent events. Or active transport. You need ATP for that. You're going to burn energy. You need ATP. Mitochondria makes ATP. Everybody see?
Yeah.
I need glucose for that. I need oxygen. Oh man, don't take me to 2086 again. That means thyroid hormone, right? And all this other stuff. So that's where again, that's next semester. So, guys, this is called that's a protein on the membrane. It opens up. When it opens up, come on in, calcium. Come on in. Come on in. When the door closes again, calcium stops. Yeah? Well, there's two things I got to do. Everyone agree? But can the calcium stay in there once it moves in?
No, it's really.
No. So I use it, and then what?
You're gonna need more.
I got to get rid of it. It can't stay there. Everyone agree? Got to get rid of it. So that means what? I got to have another protein that's going to throw it back out. Come on, get out of here, calcium. Get out of here. Yeah?
Garbage.
Or I'm going to take it and I'm going to store it in the ER. And that's what muscle does. Did everyone hear me? That's what muscle does. That's later. That's later. That's tissues. Because in tissues we go to skin we go to bone we go to muscle, and muscle we go to nerve. Everybody understand? That's later. They all gonna need calcium. Every single one of them need calcium. Bone gonna need calcium, muscle gonna need calcium, nerve gonna need calcium. This is, and I apologize, right here in the mechanical event of muscle contraction, in the electrical event, in the cardiac pacemaker, and nervous system. You could go ahead and write that down. And nervous system, write that down. All right? Because calcium can play a role in the nervous system, in the electrical event of the nervous system, of the neural system and stuff. But it plays as I was reading through it, it can play a role, and it can be an issue. So we're at cell. Atoms, molecules, compounds, cells. There's an atom right there we're talking about. That's called the ion. And an ion is actually, it's a positive ion, so they call it a cation. And that cation is a soluble form a water-soluble form of the atom calcium. How much does calcium weigh and what's its atomic number? Anyone? Look it up. You guys got phones? Look it up. Don't be afraid. You can use your phones in class as long as you're not watching the World Cup. So calcium, the atomic number and atomic mass. Atomic number and atomic mass. What is it?
It's number 20, atomic mass is 40.078.
All right, so 20 and 40?
Point. Yeah, just 40.
So 40. 20 and 40. What does that mean? Anybody? What's the smaller number mean?
How many atoms is in it?
No.
No, it's the
So here, let me write it bigger. 20. I'm like too big. So the top one, the smaller one is the atomic number.
Bottom of the atomic mass.
And the bottom one will be the atomic mass. Good. Now, in some cases, it'll be the average atomic mass, which means what? If it's an average, then that means what?
it was just a zero.
Then there's got to be a certain number
Yeah, just-
of variations of the weight.
That has.
So it's a sum of of all. Not that they're ions, but they have radioactive isotopes.
Wait, no, you have it.
They have isotopes.
You have it confused. The top is the atomic mass, the bottom is the
Oh.
atomic number.
No, I always write the atomic number up top and the mass down below. Yeah, it's bad tradition. And you may see some periodic tables that flip it, but
Yeah,
traditionally it should have the atomic number up top, the smaller numbers up top.
That's how you teach it in CAM.
Atomic mass should be down bottom. Yeah, it should be down bottom. Yeah, trust me, it should be down bottom. Anyway, larger one's always the atomic mass, just in case you're confused.
Yeah.
Smaller one is always the atomic number. And the atomic number is actually equal to the number of electrons, which is also equal to the number of protons, or positive charges. So, this is telling me the subatomic particles. Do you understand, guys? Now, we're not concerned with quarks and all these other things, right? For those of you who are nerds like me, right? Talking about even small subatomic particles, right? What makes up the positive charges and negative charges? Is even smaller, and the neutral particles are even smaller particles that they're trying to figure out, right? They're trying to find the God particle to figure out if they can create actual life itself, right? So why they're accelerating atoms through these large tubes and then colliding them together to try and find the smallest particles of what is matter itself, to try and understand how life was created. So, all right, so for number 40, which is the atomic mass,
The number of
that's going to be the number of protons, the positive charges, plus
neutrons.
the number of neutral charges, which are your neutrons. So P plus is proton, E negative is electrons, and N0 is neutrons because they're neutral, they have no charge. Everybody get me?
Yes.
Any questions so far? I told you I'd teach you the chemistry you need to know. Right? It's the beginning of chemistry. So you got your atomic number, you got your atomic mass, and why is this important? Well, okay, because we said, remember, we said, okay, we got atoms, but for us to get the compounds, we got to make molecules, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, to make molecules, we have to get atoms to stick together. And the only way that atoms stick together is through this intra-molecular forces. Those forces are due to either equal sharing of an electron between two atoms, or unequal sharing of electrons between two atoms, or complete transfer of an electron from one atom to another. Any questions?
After electron, what did you write? It says B dash T.
BT is between. B/T means between. It's shorthand for between. So B/T means between. All right. So now check it out. All right. So your closest. This is an electron. Grab the electron. Pull off the electron. We'll pull together. So we're pulling equally. All right. So that is the first character. Now pull it hard. I'm spending more time, the electron's spending more time with her than me. Everybody see that? Everybody see that? Now, here's the third scenario. Go ahead, pull it. Go ahead, you can have it, I'll let go. The moment I give that electron up, what charge will I become?
Negative.
Positive.
Positive.
The moment she took that electron on, what charge did she become?
Negative.
Negative. Everyone agree?
You're giving away your electron.
Anion, cation. The atoms that are the elements whose atoms fall within the periodic table's first column and second column are 1A and 2A metals, and 1A and 2A metals give either 1 or 2 electrons to whoever wants to take them when they're in water to become cations. You understand that? To become positive and to be an electrolyte in solution, which means electrical. So this is who we are. We're electrical in nature. And if you don't believe me, go home, disconnect the little green plug in the back of your computer, for those of you who have desktops still, all right? Put your hand to it with the speaker on. And what will you hear?
Like static.
The humming noise. Because of the electrolyte solution that we live in, that bathes every single one of our cells consistently and regularly. Everybody got me? That's why chemistry is so important. You want to save lives, don't you? Everybody raise your hand if you want to save a life. Raise your hands. You guys aren't here not to save lives. You want to save lives, don't you? At least those of you who want to be in healthcare, you want to save lives. This is where it begins. You can never forget, we are 60% water, and that water is not pure water, it's an electrolyte water. Right? Why do you think Gatorade makes millions? Sure enough, you know what? Is Gatorade enough?
No.
For those who are true athletes, is Gatorade enough?
No.
No. But what happens? And they go into the locker room, what do you think they're doing? Load me up, baby. And that's steroids. Basic IV.
Yeah, IV with water.
They get them on both arms. Put the legs up and load up more IV on them, right? Because why? Because they're losing so much through sweat. You ever see these guys play?
Continues to hydrate.
Okay, that makes
Right?
sense.
The guy's got to run out every so often and he's got to wipe the sweat off the floor. Because if not, these players will slip and fall. They're constantly sweating, the basketball players. You got to replenish those fluids if you lose them. Got to keep that homeostasis. Everyone agree?
Yes.
You want to save lives? Keep that in mind the whole time you're in this class. You want to keep things in homeostatic balance. You want to keep your water in balance. You want to keep your salt in balance. You want to keep your sugar in balance. What disease do I have if my sugar's off?
Diabetes.
Diabetes, if it's too high, if it's too low. If I'm a diabetic, would it be high or low?
Hi.
High if I'm not taking insulin. Low if what?
Anemic.
If I'm taking too much. You agree? Main reason why someone comes in with hypoglycemia, you know why?
No.
They took too much insulin.
What if you're born that way?
They took it hypoglycemic?
Yeah.
You got a problem.
Okay.
You got a serious problem. So that has to do with glucagon. So glucagon is a protein.
Right.
Gets released by the cell into the bloodstream from the pancreas, the cells of the pancreas. Leaves the cells of the pancreas. Say, bye, mommy, daddy, gotta go. Goes into the big old world of the bloodstream, floats around the bloodstream. Then it's responding to low levels of glucose in the bloodstream. The pancreas releases glucagon, its baby, into the bloodstream. Go do your job, go do your job. Glucagon goes to the liver, says, liver, yo man, I just got sent from pancreas, and pancreas released me because we got low glucose in the bloodstream. Liver then says, all right, bet. I got some glucose stored over here. Let's break this down and release and put it in the bloodstream. Glucose goes back up again. If it's really severe, liver will call on fat. Be like, yo, fat! Hey, remember that fat I stored the other day? Yeah, why don't you bring it over here? Let's make some new glucose molecules. Liver will then produce those glucose molecules and release them into the bloodstream. Bring the glucose back up again. That's glucagon. If you're hypoglycemic, there's an issue with this glucagon. Could be an issue with the receptor, could be an issue with the overall production of the hormone, which would be the pancreas. Usually you see this with people who have pancreatitis. How do you get pancreatitis? Anybody know? What's the most dangerous drug known to man?
Sugar.
Sugar. I like that answer. That means you're really thinking.
Alcohol?
Because I would say that sugar's probably one of the closest ones. Alcohol.
Yeah, that one's really cool.
I can tell you that every famous physician and every famous scientist in the world was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. They all loved hanging out in the pubs. Every single one of them. And they never went home. They go straight to the pub, get pissed drunk, go back to work. Spent all their days. Newton was an alcoholic. Why do you think these guys they didn't live long? Because they all loved their spirits. But you know what? How many of you have ever tried true spirits? You know what I'm talking about, right?
No.
The jugs of moonshine. All right?
What?
All right, moonshine? You guys know anybody who moonshines?
Some gas.
So my great grandfather used to moonshine. Yeah, right? Back in the woods, sugarcane moonshining, right?
It's a beer?
Right? No, it's just pure, unadulterated alcohol
That is gross.
From-
It smells like gas.
that they don't distill. They don't distill. So what happens? You've got methanol. Check it out now. You've got methanol with ethanol, and when you drink the methanol, you know what happens? You go blind. You lose your eyesight. So you see these old, you guys see that, right? You see the guys, they're always, the moonshiners, the show moonshiners. You see the old man, he's got no teeth and he can't see for shit.
There's a place in,
So check that stuff, man.
there's a place in South Carolina that only makes moonshine.
Now check this out. Why do I say that alcohol is the most infamous drug known to man that does damage? Because it goes to the brain and shuts down your ability to control the homeostatic balance of water. Y'all know this. What happens when you get pissed drunk?
You're dehydrated.
You dehydrated. Why are you dehydrated?
The water's
Because you're pissing like a racehorse. Everyone agree?
Yeah.
You go to the bathroom, you eat there for like 20 minutes, man. And another 20 minutes, right? Then it takes like another 2-3 minutes to shake, right? And then you wonder why you're waking up in the morning with a headache. Because you got no more water. Your homeostatic balance is off. What happens to your blood? Bless you. What happens to your blood? If I lost the water, now it's gone. See ya. What happens to the blood?
It's going in the
It's no more being produced.
It becomes thicker.
Okay.
thicker.
It doesn't flow the same. Oh. See why you get the headache? You guys, I won't teach you any other way. It makes sense? It makes sense. I'm going to teach you this way because it makes sense. So alcohol dehydrates the body. That means it affects the brain, the heart, the kidneys, the liver. You go ahead. Go ahead. You want to destroy your body? Go ahead. Be my guest. You want to keep drinking alcohol? Be my guest. You're dehydrating your brain little by little. It makes no sense. And I'm telling you, lots of alcoholics out there. People got to wake up in the morning, take a couple shots, right, before they go. It's dangerous stuff, man. It's dangerous stuff. And yet we got commercials on it all the time. Right? Making it look like it's fun, but drink responsible. Yeah, make no sense. So, water imbalance. Water, alcohol, ethanol inhibits this ability for you to conserve the water. So you lose more water and you throw your homeostatic balance off. You see how that can I get epileptic seizures?
Yes.
If I drink too much alcohol?
Yes.
Can I fall into a coma if I drink too much alcohol?
Yes.
Can I die if I drink too much alcohol?
Yes.
Can I have a stroke if I drink too much alcohol? I met a student, 21 years old, sitting in this class, wanting to take, not this particular class, but a class, 2085, wanting to take. First test came around, she didn't show up. She came to me afterwards and she told me why. I sat with her and she binge drinking since she was 14. And she would drink to get plastered. And then I told her, well, I get stressed and I start vomiting. So have you go see a neurologist? She said, yeah. Just told me to stop drinking. I said, did they ever tell you that you had a stroke? And that you affected an area of the brain called the area postrema. It's responsible for the vomiting center. So now every time she gets stressed, she vomits. So you can't be the ER nurse that you wanted. You imagine it? Stressful event, all of a sudden now you become the patient. You're supposed to be the healthcare worker. Can't do that. You gotta find yourself another job. I'm not telling you how to be a nurse, but you can't be in that stressful event. because then she's just gonna start vomiting. So can you do damage to the brain and still be like functional, but then all of a sudden, like not be able to control your own vomit? I don't know about you, but I don't want to be in a situation like that. You follow? So yeah, alcohol is dangerous, guys. Very dangerous, and it throws that water. So you can see how the impact is. If I throw my water balance off, then all these other salts that are in the bloodstream, they look like they're in higher concentration. Yeah? And then if they move into the cells, then I can get an epileptic seizure, I can fall into a coma, I could die. So that's long term. You want to keep drinking, but little here, little there, get that cirrhosis of the liver and get all those complications and everything else. Yeah, good luck with that one, because that just as effective as just take a loaded gun and put a bullet to your head, because that's what you're doing. You're just doing it over years. Cirrhosis is the worst of it, man. You get these nasty hemorrhoids and these esophageal varices. You start vomiting blood, all this other stuff. Man, I don't want that life. I don't touch alcohol by the way. I don't drink it. Question?
I read also that it's one of the quickest drugs to get you addicted, and one of the reasons for the hangover is withdrawal.
I do believe.
So you
Yes.
literally go through addiction and withdrawal within that period of time that you were
Yeah.
drinking and then stop drinking.
I do believe that alcohol is the gateway drug. I believe that most people try alcohol before they try anything else. And it's the alcohol that gets them to try other things. So.
But like
I was gonna say
two
cigarettes.
glasses of
Cigarettes
wine.
too.
I think it was more cigarettes than nicotine in the cigarettes.
And it's scary.
Because when I was in psychology, there was some sort of test that they had shown us that pretty much after doing any activity and smoking a cigarette makes that activity an addiction because the nicotine
Yeah,
makes
it reinforces
it whatever you did.
Because the nicotine is an actual neurotransmitter. It is a neurotransmitter. And they did add it to tobacco for your consumption to get you hooked to the shit for life.
But I'm also talking
And they
about
lied about it to the
people that-
American people. They lied about it, and then they got caught.
I mean, in the circumstance where someone does cocaine and smokes a cigarette afterwards, it's not necessarily because they did cocaine; it's because they smoked a cigarette.
Yeah,
Afterwards.
it potentiates because it acts as a neurotransmitter. Now, cocaine has a different role to play. Two together,
Yeah.
So we did an experiment where at FIU we had live frogs, and we took the frogs and we picked the frogs so they don't feel no pain. Flip them over on the backside and we cut open their chest and expose their heart. We hook it up to a transducer, pops up and down, and gives us the heart function in a graph. We then put nicotine on it, and when you put the nicotine on it at first, it increases the heart rate. Very first time it gets exposed, but as you continue to add to it, it slows the heart rate down. So acute versus chronic exposure to nicotine directly to the heart will increase the heart rate initially and then decrease the heart rate long term as you continue to expose it. And this is a drug that they added purposefully into cigarettes, guys. Scary? Well, sure enough. What did I tell you? 50% of the time we do more harm than good from lack of knowing. Okay, from lack of knowing. So, questions? Any other questions? Yeah.
What else nicotine does?
So it acts directly as a neurotransmitter on receptor, what they call postganglionic receptors on neurons. And so they use this drug to actually elucidate the differences between these neurons and the physiological effect. And when we get there, we'll talk about it. It's called parasympathetic nervous system, which does the fight or flight response. This is why one of the things that one of the reasons why females use cigarettes is to curb hunger, because the nicotine will mimic the parasympathetics, not mimic it, but kind of inhibit the whole process by kind of competing with acetylcholine at this receptor. It's like a competition. You got to think about this, right? So this is a door. Everyone agree? It's a receptor on the membrane. It's got a key, yeah? And so that key is special for the door, yeah? What if I bring a dummy key in? What do I mean by dummy key?
That it fits in.
That it fits in, but it doesn't open. Everyone agree?
Yeah.
So now the two are competing for the same site, yeah? You see how that's happening? So if I put the key in that fits and works, the door will open. If I put the key in that doesn't, then the door won't open, but the key that wants to fit in there to open the door can't. You get me? So they're in competition with each other.
Blocking though.
They're blocking each other. So that's what winds up happening. And so what it does is it curbs the hunger, and that's why a lot of females, that's why you see an increased rise in cigarette usage, because females, they're always worried about weight and everything else. Any way they can figure out a way to kind of curb their hunger, they'll do that. And I mean, that's the theory. So, not that guys aren't worried about it, because guys are just as worried about it. All right, and yeah, when I was younger, I couldn't walk past the mirror and not look at myself. I had to work on that. I was constantly looking at myself in the mirror. When I would work out, I'd look in the mirror. I get used to looking at myself in the mirror all the time. I find myself doing this regularly. Other people see it, and guys can see it, man. Look at themselves in the mirror all the time. So you don't want people to get the wrong message and get the wrong ideas. So. And these are all things that, as healthcare workers, you deal with. People have this, like NPR, we're talking about people with, plastic surgeons and people coming in, body dysmorphic disorder. And then now they're starting to see a new form of body dysmorphic disorder because of the whole, the Snapchats and the ability to change, you look through Snapchats and that you go to the physician, it's like, okay, this is how I want to look. Just like Snapchat makes me look, this is how I want you to make me look. So it's giving rise to a whole nother, like a whole nother set of body dysmorphic disorder type people who are coming in and want to get plastic surgery. Cosmetic stuff, yeah. And there's a psychological component there, and doctors were required that when we see these patients to evaluate them for psychological conditions and tell them, hey, you know what, if you've got a psych condition that I can work on you and you look fine to me, but you keep wanting to get worked on, yeah, you got a psychological issue, I'm not working on you, you need to go get help.
That's why a lot of people go out of this country.
Yeah, they go other places, and then sure enough, they get too much surgery, nose collapses.
Is that new?
What's that?
That psychological evaluation, is that new?
No, it's actually been around for a while, but it's
Some people don't use it because they want the money.
Because plastic surgeons make buku buck, yeah. Every time you go in there, they get paid, right? So yeah, look, some of them are uncouth. They don't really care about your psychological. They just gonna, hey, you want to look like that? Sure, I'll make you look like that. Yeah, you want me to work your nose 50 times and it's gonna collapse on you? Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do it, no problem. Oh yeah, you want Botox and you get your lip all numbed up, right? Look like somebody punched you in the face, and then it doesn't go away. Yeah, because you don't realize what you're injecting is something very bad for you.
Isn't it poison?
And yeah, and then what happens is they'll go from one physician to another, and they'll keep getting more injections because they're only supposed to get a certain amount, and it can kill you. This stuff is
Botox
dangerous.
is poison?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
it's
what
bad.
it's actually Botox is a toxin produced by a bacteria. It's an endotoxin produced by a bacteria, which in large concentrations will kill you.
And also cuts off like the supply of blood in the face.
It does all kinds of stuff. It can induce an inflammatory reaction. That's why when you get some people, they get injected and then they get this
Their nerves
severe
and faces.
inflammation that doesn't go away, and then they sue the doctor. But it's, hey, when you sign that on that dotted line, it says I went over all the, and you signed it, and I went over it, and you all the risks. Like what I tell you, 50% of the time you do more harm than good.
Yeah.
Hey, why am I putting botulinum toxin into your lip and into your face, nose? Why? Because of wrinkles. Come on, man.
Wrinkles are inevitable.
I mean, it's inevitable. There's nothing you can do to stop it, right? Except don't drink, don't smoke, and don't go outside in the sun in excess. And of course, eat as healthy as you possibly can before. All right. So guys, these forces, these intramolecular forces that are either equally sharing an electron between two atoms, unequally sharing the electron between two atoms, or completely transferring an electron from two atoms. They have names. As forces, they have names. Those forces, those intramolecular forces, the forces within the molecule, they're going to be considered either non-polar covalent, polar covalent, or ionic bonds. Now, how many of you have heard of this before? Question?
Is the recording getting the whole board?
Yes, yeah, it should. Yeah, I got it on the far end there, and it should be able to reach it. So you'll hear me say this again, and I'll go over it a few more times besides today, and you'll hear about it over and over again. So this is important, guys, because non-polar covalent bonds will, guys, let's think about this. If I'm a plasma membrane, what's the plasma membrane of a cell made of? Anybody know? Anybody remember?
Protein.
There is protein in there, in the plasma membrane of the cell, but the main component of the plasma membrane is really what? Phospholipids. Did everybody hear me? Phospholipids. And when you look at, so the main component of the plasma membrane and any of the membranes, guys. The membrane of the nucleus, the membrane of the mitochondria, the membrane of the ER, the membrane of the Golgi. The ribosomes aren't membranes. The ribosomes are proteins. Everybody understand?
Yes.
Ribosomes are proteins. But all the lines, all the Golgi, the plasma membrane, the ER, the outer nuclear membrane, internuclear membrane, outer mitochondrial membrane, internuclear membrane, the vesicle system that brings stuff in and out, because I can bring stuff in called endocytosis, and I can take stuff out, right? Called exocytosis, endocytosis, exocytosis. So that whole process of bringing in membrane, the main component of the membrane is this thing called the phospholipid. Well, let's discuss that. What's phosphate?
That's fat.
Lipid is fat. And the phosphate is what?
I know
It's an ion. It's another ion. It's actually an anion. It's PO4 negative 3 when it's by itself. Everybody see that? So listen to the word again. Phospholipid. It's got a phosphate head with fatty tails. Did everybody hear me? So the phospholipid is a polar head with non-polar tails. Okay, non-polar tails. So guys, look, non-polar tails. Let's go over here. Non-polar covalency. You think that there's a relationship between the two? Sure enough, there is. If I look at the structure of a fatty acid, because lipids are made up of fatty acids, lipids are made up of fatty acids. You put two fatty acids with glycerol and a phosphate, hey, we got a phospholipid. Everybody understand that? So when we take a fatty acid, this is what a fatty acid looks like, everybody. I'm not going to draw all the H's, but where I draw the lines, that means there's an H at the end. With no H written, it means everywhere there is H's. And over here, I got that. That's a fatty acid.
Is that the exact numbers of the C?
It can be varied. It can vary. It can be a short chain. It can be a very short chain fatty acid, which means the carbon chain is short. Or it can be a very long chain fatty acid, which means the chain is very long. You understand that?
Yes.
Now let's look at this. What are we looking at here? Carbon, 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 carbon. So if you're carbon and I'm carbon, we're the same. What do you think we're going to do with our electrons? Are you going to be pulling it more than me, or I'm going to be pulling more than you, or are we going to be sharing it equally? Sharing it equally. Did everybody see that? So now look, every one of these bonds can be classified as an equal sharing of electrons between two carbon atoms. So we call that nonpolar covalent. And everywhere there, nonpolar covalent, 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 nonpolar covalent. And the one between the carbon and hydrogen's here. Well, that's interesting because in there, they're not the same. Therefore, they're not quite pulling. But there's calculated values in chemistry because of all these alcoholics that had nothing better to do than drink and go to work. And go to work and drink. Right? And then be at work drinking. Right? And then being at the bar still working. Right? So that kind of thing. So they dedicated their lives to drinking and working. And they figured out that there were actual values. So if I had a value and we're both carbons, then whatever that value is, when I subtract the two, it's 0. Everyone agree? However, if I'm a carbon and she's a hydrogen and we have two different values, then for me to be nonpolar covalent, I have to be at a value of less than 0.4 between the two atoms. So as long as nonpolar covalent is going to be nonpolar covalent, as long as the calculated value is anywhere between 0.0 and 0.4, by convention, some books will go 0.7 as high. Okay? So you'll see some books say 0.7, some books will say 0.4. So I'm either greater than or equal to 0, or I'm less than 0.7. Watch. Carbon-carbon. The value, I didn't tell you what the value is, but I'm going to tell you what the value is now for carbon. Carbon's value of electronegativity is 2.5. So when I take the difference in electronegativity between this carbon and that carbon, 2.5 and 2.5, what's the difference? Does everyone agree? 0. So that's going to tell me, oh, I'm between 0 and 0.7? Oh, that means that's got to be a nonpolar covalent bond. Everybody understand that?
Yeah.
And by definition, a nonpolar covalent bond is an equal sharing of an electron between two atoms. So can you see why, guys? This is the ideal molecule to make up plasma membranes? Because it's not going to want to share electrons with anything other than itself. Huh? So it's going to be really good at creating a barrier. Does that make sense, guys? Does that make sense? I want the stablest molecule to make my barrier. Does that make sense? Sure enough, my fatty acids are going to be my stablest molecule. Why? Because they have these long chains of carbons who all have nonpolar covalent bonds, which gives the tail end of this molecule hydrophobicity. What do I mean by that? Hydrophobicity. It has a fear for water. Does that make sense? So guys, if it has a fear for water, is it going to interact with water?
No. Well, I would think it would.
Wait, so it would
Yeah.
if it was at that end. Because it could attract another water molecule. The electrons of this oxygen could attract the hydrogens of that water molecule. But at that end,
No.
so this is hydrophobic. And that right there could be hydrophilic, meaning it will want to interact with water. Because it at least looks like water, doesn't it? Does everybody see that OH? Yeah? So an OH, it can interact with that water molecule. So at one end, this is perfect, isn't it? Because if I take this guy and I stick him in the membrane, hey, I got that polar end and that non-polar end, yeah? And that's what I want, so that I can take all my tails of my phospholipids. Even better, I won't interact with water, and I'll put some other molecule onto this and then put a phosphate group on it. So then I make the thing even more stable. Do you get me? And that's what a phospholipid is. A phospholipid is a phosphate group with a glycerol, a little 3-carbon molecule called glycerol, and 2 fatty acid chains. And that phospholipid, we have millions of them making up the structure of one cell. One cell, guys. That's, again, those molecules, those compounds that we're talking about. Everybody follow? Because that phospholipid is the compound. But when we put those compounds together, then we were able to create the barrier, which is the plasma membrane. We're able to create the nuclear membrane, the outer nuclear membrane, the internuclear membrane, the outer mitochondrial membrane, the inner mitochondrial membrane. Everybody understand? Because of this idea of atoms and molecules. And once we got molecules, we can make compounds. And once we got compounds, we can kind of redistribute them and utilize those characteristics that are innate within each to then kind of create this beautiful barrier, selective membrane barrier. What does that mean, selective? That means
what goes inside.
chooses what goes inside. And what really determines what comes in and goes out? Morning calcium. Morning sodium. Going out potassium. I gotta have a door. That door is a protein. You understand? So back to chapter 1, physiology. How does a cell respond to its environment? That's physiology. Yeah? How does it do that? It's got to have the proteins in the membrane. Except it's got to have ones outside, it's got to have ones inside. I don't know what's going on with this thing. Oh, the figures, the battery's low, running low now. All right, so we're done, aren't we? We finished at 12:30.
12:30.
Any questions so far? Any questions at all? At all? So I know we're jumping around, but have no fear, because we'll come back into chapter 1, we'll talk about, the certain regions, and we'll talk about the different organ systems, right? And then we'll continue talking about this chemistry, because it doesn't stop here, guys, right? We are complex. Does everyone agree?
Yes.
Because not only do I have to worry about making molecules, but then I have to worry about how the molecules that I make interact with each other. Does everyone agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is a whole nother set of forces, not intramolecular, but intermolecular. That's between two molecules, not within the atoms, but between two molecules. Everybody got me?
Yep.
And the main one there that we concern ourselves with is hydrogen bonding. That's this. The exchange of, it's like, anybody ever see WALL-E?
Yeah.
See, I love WALL-E, because, WALL-E come in, hard day at work, right? So human-like. It's hard day at work, what's he want? He wants entertainment. He pulls out his VHS, he sticks it into his DVR, gives it a little slam, right? Boom. He sees, he's got entertainment, he's got people dancing, yeah? Well, so when I see the old school dances and stuff like that, when people say, well, man, how do they